So I started to work at Amazon around 9 months ago, and from the first day that I started working there was a lot of things that really surprised me about the day-to-day life of being a software engineer working for a FAANG company. And there's a couple of things that I really wish I knew going into the job that would have made my life just a bit easier, and that's what I want to share with you all today. The first thing that I want to talk about is how much communication you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. If you think about Amazon as a company as a whole, there's like 2 million employees, there's thousands, tens of thousands of developers, there's so many different products, there's so much going on, there's so many sources for information, there's so many APIs that you can call, and naturally your team is going to be pretty small, maybe like 10-15 people. And so conceptually what you can understand is there's so many developers, there's so many different teams, there's so many different products, there's different teams working on the same product, and naturally there's a lot of communication that you're going to be doing every single day in order to get your tasks complete. There's going to be a lot of times where you have no idea how to do something, or there's some kind of API you have to call that you don't know what the API even is, and you'll have to do research on it, like internal documentation. You're going to have to reach out to a couple of different people and kind of ask them for support, schedule meetings, and then present things, as well as request information. And you have to be able to communicate it in a very effective way if you want to succeed at one of these companies. Let's say you're building a feature that needs some sort of information and another team owns that, right? Before you meet with that team to discuss, using their data and using their backend services, for example, what you have to do is prepare some sort of document, right? You got to prepare your use case. You have to prepare examples of how you're going to use the data, and you're going to have to ask the appropriate questions so that you're ready for any kind of scenario. Before you start implementing, there's a lot of discovery, a lot of design that you have to do, and ensuring that you're a clear communicator, you keep track of your questions. Before going into the meeting, you have all the questions you want to ask. As the meeting is going on, you're taking notes, you're writing answers, and the most important part that I think is missed a lot of the time is you're noting down action items that you follow up on afterwards, right? So you note down some things that you have to do, some things the other team might have to do, and then you commit to following up with each other afterwards and actually going through with whatever you were going to do. There's a lot of different small processes that you have to incorporate into your day-to-day life that isn't necessarily just coding, right? And that's something I'm going to touch on a little bit later in this video as well. So definitely going into this job, I never really thought about the amount of communication you're going to have to be doing with other teams, and I never thought about how many teams there really are. There's so many teams, and I guarantee you that if you're working at any FAANG company, not just Amazon, there's tens of thousands of employees at least, and there's going to be a lot of different teams that you have to interact with. So I would say if that is one of your goals, then at your current job, or if you're like a student or you're in a boot camp right now learning how to code, I would say really focus on your communication skills. Whenever you have an opportunity to work with other developers, really try to follow a couple of rules, right? We've talked about this before on my channel, but always have questions prepared, always have different solutions that you've tried before prepared before you ask. Stuff like that is going to make you a better communicator, and building these habits early on will ensure your success when you eventually do reach your goals and you get a job at a FAANG company. The second thing that I wish I knew going into my job at Amazon is that there's this thing called on-call. So on-call is basically every software developer on a team has to be on the on-call rotation. So one by one, each developer gets a week, and during that week, you have to be available 24/7. And you can get paged issues of different severity levels. But if you get paged with one of the highest severity level, you got to be on and you got to fix it, right? So this concept was something that I kind of knew about, but was kind of foreign to me, and I never really thought about it. But now that I've been at Amazon for around 9 months, I've done a couple of on-call rotations, and it definitely seemed more intimidating at first. It's definitely not the most fun thing about the job, but at first when you hear about this concept that you can get paged in the middle of the night, something breaks and you have to fix it, right? It can be very intimidating. But there's a couple of ways that you can prepare for it, and all of this naturally you go through during your onboarding and as you gain more experience at the job. A couple of things that you can do is you ensure that you know where to go for resources when you need them, right? So previously in one of my videos in the last couple of weeks, I was talking about how one of the most important parts about being a software developer is that you have to be able to be resourceful, and when you don't know the answer to something and you don't even know where to find the resources to something, you still don't give up, and you know how to ask questions and where to kind of look for possible resources. This is a good way to prepare for on-call. Teams have documents readily available for common occurrences, right? So there's a clear list of steps laid out for issues that arise often. However, obviously sometimes you're going to get hit with a random thing that you have no idea how to fix, But if you familiarize yourself with the documentation that your team has available, with all the possible resources, maybe there's some forums, internal forums, or, different websites internally where people ask questions. If you know where these are and you're prepared beforehand, then when something does occur, you kind of like prepare for the worst, right? You have to know where everything is so that when the worst case happens, you're ready, you know where to look, you know who to ask, and that it really makes it a lot less intimidating. And I'm not gonna lie, after you do your first one, the rest are less scary, but it's never like the nicest thing. I would say it's really important to just keep your composure during on-call, because it's very like slippery slope. You can like very easily panic, and that would just lead to like worse performance, right? You don't perform as well when you're panicking. You have to find a way to stay calm. I usually, when I'm on call, I just work from home. It's like a less stressful environment. And also on that subject of staying calm, if you develop the proper sleep habits, if you go to sleep early during on-call, you get the right amount of rest, so that if potentially you get some sort of issue in the middle of the night, you're ready for it and it doesn't really ruin your whole week, right? You have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're getting the proper amount of rest, especially during on-call. And the third thing that I want to talk about is design work, documentation, and basically all the things that aren't necessarily coding related. Right? So myself personally, when I graduated from university, I was under the impression that when you're a software developer, all you do is you go in, you get some sort of feature, some sort of bug, and then you just code and you're done. But if you haven't already, what you'll learn really quickly on the job is that there's so much more to being a software developer than just coding. There's a lot of designing you have to do. There's a lot of documentation. Before you want to implement any new feature, as requests come in, you want to be able to kind of do a deep dive into the existing resources you already have, into how the code is already working, and then develop a strategy in order to implement whatever the task is. You can't just go in blind, because then there's a lot of guesswork, then there's a lot of trial and error, and it's not really the most efficient way. However, if you get a task, you take some time to understand it, you take some time to explore your different options, you follow through on those explorations. So, you talk to one team, you talk to another team, you figure out all the effort required to implement this solution using all the different options that you have, right? If you take that time, you develop one strategy, you consult your teammates, you consult your manager, and you really put in the time before you start coding, then that makes the actual coding part so much easier, so much more streamlined, and you're going to make less mistakes, and just everything is going to be a lot more efficient. On top of that, obviously everyone has meetings and stuff. There's a lot of planning that development teams do as well. For every sprint, tasks are laid out, and the team kind of decides what is in scope for a certain sprint, what can be achieved, what's unrealistic. I would say that the bigger the company is, the more tasks you're going to have to be doing that are not coding related, just because there's so many different resources to look at. There's so much more code that you can do a deep dive on. And just, I would say in general, there's a lot more catching up to do and a lot more knowledge that you have to gain up front and as you keep going into your career. So guys, before you commit to working at a FAANG company, to getting this dream job, just take a couple of these things into consideration. You will be doing on-call. It's a pretty tough part of the job, but it's definitely worth it. It's not the worst thing in the world. There's a lot of designing, a lot of documentation you'll be doing as well. And the third thing to consider that you might not think of is just how much communication you are going to be doing with other teams, how many different teams you have to work with, how many different resources there are. And so all of this is what makes it such a fulfilling job, right? So if that's your goal, go for it. It's a great experience, and I've definitely enjoyed it so far. As always, guys, if you've enjoyed the video, please like it down below, leave a comment as well if there's anything you want to add or anything that you guys think I missed, and don't forget to subscribe as well. That would absolutely make my day. As always, guys, take it easy and enjoy your coding.